One of the opportunities that I have as Speaker of the House here in Utah is I get to participate in an annual Speakers Conference. And that Speakers Conference is where, like Speakers of the House of respective states come together once a year, and we have meetings. And the meeting that I enjoy the most is the meeting where we sit together and we go around the table and we talk about the things that our state, what we as a legislative body, as well as the state are grappling with, what are the challenges, how are we sorting our way through those challenges, and you get to learn a lot. And we have these nameplates so that we know which state we're from, who we are, but they don't identify whether we're Republicans or Democrats, and what that does is it actually has the effect of we are collaborating and discussing issues, not really knowing from what political party we hail from. It adds perspective, valuable perspective that I as a lawmaker have not had before, and I know that my colleagues that I serve with don't realize themselves. I have a saying, you don't know what you don't know. So as I attend this conference and as I am sitting at this meeting, I am listening to the first of many speakers of the House of different states talk about what are the most critical issues that they are addressing. One of them was a transportation initiative, or dealing with a gas tax that over the years shrinks and shrinks and shrinks while populations grow, transportation needs increase, and lacking the political will to really address transportation funding. This was shared by many speakers as one of the most critical issues that they were having a hard time finding consensus around and being able to move the needle. And in my mind, I remember thinking to myself and thinking of our body of House members, and I mean this in a bipartisan way, but I mean the whole House. I mean the whole legislature, our Senate colleagues. I remember thinking on the topic of transportation initiatives or transportation funding, I made a mental check. Because we did, for the first time since 1996, adopt a multimodal, comprehensive transportation plan that does begin to restore funding in a state like ours here in Utah that's growing so quickly. We need expansion of roads. We need the maintenance and repair of roads throughout the state. And every one of these colleagues from different states, speakers of the House, they're having a hard time getting those answers or getting that right. And I thought, we passed that bill. And that is something that we should be very proud of, and that we just move on to the next challenge, and we sometimes don't take inventory of the big issues that we take on and that we're able to find consensus and, again, make a difference. One of the other topics that is really troubling a lot of state houses across this country right now are anti-discrimination bills and LGBT issues. The other side of that coin is religious freedoms and religious liberties. And you're finding great angst and great conflict in our state governments around the country in terms of what to do on policy fronts regarding anti-discrimination and religious liberties. And I thought again in my head, that's another box we can check, because we here in Utah passed comprehensive reform that addressed anti-discrimination amongst the LGBT community at the same time and in the same bill that we honored, respected, and protect our religious freedoms and our religious liberties. And that comprehensive bill, while we celebrated it at the time, we again move on to all the other issues, and we don't take inventory that that's something that other states have not found consensus on or been able to find progress, but we have moved the needle. Public education. Probably the most popular or most important issue for public servants that represent constituents around this country are our kids, our public schools, and how we fund them. Here in Utah, we have a robust traditional public education system, and we have a robust non-traditional public education system that we call charter schools. And if you've seen in the hallways out here, and if you've seen in the education committees, there seems to be conflict at times between our charter schools and our traditional public schools. We had a task force that dealt with some of the oldest and long-standing disagreements and issues of funding these schools and these models of public education. And from that task force, we were able to arrive at compromise legislation that brought together our traditional public schools and our charter schools on our property tax funding and how those schools and those educational systems will be funded. And they did it together, and we all did it together, arm in arm. So we had compromise legislation where public education and charter schools came together in an important and significant bill, and one that we'd not been able to arrive at consensus for many, many years. And I heard that conflict that's out there in this country, where there's the kind of debate and rancor going on. And I thought again in my head, that's another box we can check, that we've done some serious work, and we've not let perfect be the enemy of good, but we have found that consensus. Probably in my time of service, the hardest issue that I've ever had before me as a lawmaker. We have a saying up here in the Capitol that it's easy to kill a bill and hard to pass a bill by design. Medicaid expansion and not passing this Medicaid expansion, which was a part of the ACA or Obamacare Act, was probably much, much harder to not pass than to pass, because there was a lot of momentum and a lot of free federal money, and I use the word free loosely. There was a lot of money that the federal government would pay up front, but there would be a day when states would have a portion that they would have to pay, a percentage, and those bills or that portion would be due in years to come. So you saw many states that took advantage of Medicaid expansion and those federal dollars, and didn't pay as much attention or stare close enough at what amount of money the state would have to pay once its portion came due. Well, in this conversation that I was having with these speakers of the House, 2017 is when states begin to pay their portion of Medicaid expansion. I heard from my colleagues from around the country that the enrollment rates, those that would sign up for Medicaid expansion, that they based kind of what we call up here the fiscal note, what it would cost to actually pay our state portion, the enrollment numbers are far greater than what they predicted. The cost of delivering Medicaid or health care to individuals is much greater than what was estimated at the time that they accepted the Medicaid expansion plan. So we have many states that are looking and having a hard time understanding how they're going to be able to pay their portion, and where in states, because we balance budgets, we're not a federal government that prints money or deficit spends, what in state government will go without to make up for the increased costs that states will have to pay for Medicaid expansion. And as I heard that challenge described amongst my colleagues, I thought that one was a tough one, but that is a box that we checked in terms of avoiding that kind of deficit or that kind of budget challenge. But at the same time we did that, at the same time that we realized that the math wasn't as solid as some would portray, or receive the money now and worry about the consequences later is a process that we don't subscribe to here in Utah. At the same time we were rebuffing that Obamacare Medicaid expansion plan, we focused squarely on the most needy of this state. How did we do it? We passed a traditional Medicaid expansion that would focus and expand traditional Medicaid to the most needy amongst us. We've also tackled justice reform. We found ourselves incarcerating people that have found themselves addicted to drugs and sick and maybe committing crimes because they're sick. And we're spending taxpayer dollars incarcerating them, but seeing them once they leave the incarceration, a recidivism rate and a return rate of well over 50%, when the real problem, if we went upstream, was to deal with the addiction. So we had a massive reform in justice we called JRI, or Justice Reform Initiative. And in that reform, we took on how we sentence people, and if people are sick, we look to help them through behavioral health and through addiction, and we help them specifically with that without spending the dollars and seeing those dollars climb through simple incarceration. That was a very tough bill to pass, but it was one that was the right thing to do. It took a lot of collaboration, not just with state lawmakers in a bipartisan way, but it also took working with our county attorneys, county prosecutors, and working on a comprehensive plan. And I'm very proud of the work that we did to make that happen. And that, again, is another example of how we have focused on helping the needy in a time where the political pressure was to maybe get behind a bill that the federal government made a lot of promises of how they would pay for, but we're seeing that those federal promises are pretty thin, and they're failing to keep their obligations. The other issue we took on, again, looking at the needy and those most vulnerable amongst us, was our homelessness initiative. With the County of Salt Lake and the City of Salt Lake City and this state legislature realizing that there are social costs that we pay as a state through Health and Human Services. We've come together in a bipartisan way, in a collaborative way, to look at this homelessness issue in our state, one that's growing, one that has impacts not only to the individuals and their trajectory in life, but to innocent children who find themselves in these environments, and even to the economies and the businesses around where this problem is growing, and growing in a very dangerous way. We've put our political differences aside, and we have tackled this issue together, and we continue to do it. It's not an easy issue. If it's going to make a difference, and it's easy to do, someone else has probably already done it. The only things we have left in the Capitol here to do are the impactful things that are inherently hard. And this is another issue that we've taken on, and we are making a difference. Of the 32 states that were together at this conference, 12 of them are experiencing budget shortfall. What that means is that the budgets they passed in their last legislative session, the taxpayer couldn't keep the bill. They did not provide enough taxes paid for the state government to run what it said it would run and pay for what it said it would pay for. So they have to go into special session and now cut back and cut state expenditures or appropriations that they had just written in their last session. Utah doesn't have that challenge. Our challenge as a state is we've had record quarters of economic growth. The spike hasn't been sky high, it's been a steady growth, but what our challenge has been is to make sure that our eyes aren't bigger than our appetites, and that we don't commit taxpayers to a state budget that would be difficult to be able to pay for, and that those tax dollars would arrive here in the State House. So we don't have a budget shortfall. We are very conservative with our numbers when we set our budgets, and for that, we don't find ourselves yo-yoing appropriations where we promise in our general session new spending and larger budgets, only to come 6 months later or less and have to cut those back because we made commitments we can't keep. And some states, due to the way that they project their budgets or what their economy is doing in their state, makes it necessary for them to come and cut. And that's a difficult place to be as a state lawmaker, to come back into special session. I've done it. We've done it here in our state. But it is one of the successes we have here that we are very careful with the way that we budget and set those budgets, and we are able to honor the commitments we make. So I share this with you now so that you can take some inventory on the kind of things, kind of hard work and heavy lifting that happens here in the House, happens in the Senate, happens in the legislature, happens in state government, that many states wish they had the accomplishments, the progress that we've made. They see that and they wish that that was what was happening more often in their states. So congratulations to all, and we have much to be proud of.